Members of this 66th legislature, Lieutenant Governor Mike Cooney, honored members of the judiciary, other elected officials, and our tribal leaders, members of the cabinet, and my coworkers, my beloved wife Lisa, and our three kids, Caroline, Alex, and Cameron. Thank you for the honor of inviting me into the People's House for my fourth and final State of the State address. As has been the case each of the previous times, it's a humbling privilege to stand before you as Montana's 24th governor. 6 years ago, I stood at this very spot, and I introduced myself by saying, "My name's Steve, and I work for the state." I told you I'd work hard every day, guided by my values, to protect the state that gave me the opportunity in life to go from delivering newspapers to the governor's house as a child to living and raising our three children in it today. The sounds in the Bullock household have changed over those 6 years. The sounds of young children laughing and playing have turned into silent eye rolls, exasperated sighs of embarrassment, as those young children have grown into teenagers. And while my dad jokes and my dabs are awesome, apparently being governor is no longer as cool as it once was. Though the household sounds have changed, there's still a constant reminder to me of the reason I show up for work each day. My family's always shaped my perspective in office, because as a father, I want my kids and all Montana kids to have every opportunity I had growing up here and more. 6 years after our family moved into the governor's house, 6 years after I had the honor of first standing before you, I am pleased to report the state of our state is stronger than ever. The first time I stood at this rostrum in 2013, I spoke of all the work that we have to do and also of the tremendous opportunities that lie ahead. At the time, our unemployment rate was 5.6%. Now it's at the lowest in a decade at 3.7. More people are working than ever before in our state's history. We've added almost 34,000 jobs since January 2013, while we have fewer state employees today than the day I took office. And real wages, they're on the rise. Today, the average Montana worker earns $108 more each and every week than they did 6 years ago. And that's real money. Families are climbing that ladder of opportunity to the middle class. Montana's middle-class households grew more than any other state between 2013 and 16. In 2017, our median household income growth grew nearly 2.5 times the national average, the fastest in the nation. Business is booming, and it's no surprise. Since 2013, we've repealed or revised hundreds of regulations and removed red tape. We've cut the business equipment tax for every Montana business, eliminated it for 2/3 of the businesses paying it. And you know, we see Montana's economic success directly in our communities. 15 months ago, we began working with ClassPass, which is a fitness tech startup, as they were deciding among 29 states where to expand their New York, and San Francisco operations. They chose Missoula, Montana. Originally planning to hire 50 people, we recently celebrated the hiring of their 100th. And the CEO tells me they plan to hire another 100 in Montana this year alone. This economic success, it's not confined just to our urban areas. We see it in our rural communities as well. Ticketprinting.com has 100,000 customers. It's the leading company in the world for event and raffle ticket printing. It's also the largest commercial employer in Wheatland County. It has a customer service team that works remotely from places like Big Timber, Columbus, and the suburbs of Tudor. We see that success on our Native American reservations. In the past 6 years, we've made it easier for businesses located within our tribal nations to work with customers and businesses across our state. And we funded 120 businesses that have created or retained 220 jobs through the Indian Equity Fund. We also see it on our farms and in our forests. We rank near the top in barley, wheat, and organic production. We lead the nation in pulse crops, doubling that acreage since 2013. Because of the Forest and Focus program, we produced nearly 200 million board feet of timber in the last 4 years, retaining 3,000 jobs in the forest product sector. And we're now working across landscapes, state, federal, tribal, and private. We see that economic success in our outdoors. Our clean air, our clean water, our public lands are our way of life, but they're also a key economic driver. Our outdoor economy generates over $7 billion a year in consumer spending and sustains 71,000 jobs. And we see it in our vibrant towns. Since my time in office, we've helped over 15,000 small businesses expand their footprint through economic development tools that were created under Governor Roscoe. These programs have supported more than 12,000 jobs, and they're also up for renewal this year. I encourage you to continue to strengthen this legacy for our small businesses and for the long-term strength of our economy. Montana has extraordinary economic strength. The fabric of our communities, our schools, our families, our outdoors, our main streets, they contribute to our unparalleled quality of life. Together, we can do more to ensure all our cities and towns make up the best state to live, work, start a business, and raise a family. The most important investments we make as public servants will impact Montana long after we've completed our time in office. Foremost among them is ensuring that our kids, students, and workers have a world-class education. Public education is one of our state's great equalizers. I would not be standing here today if it wasn't for our public schools. No matter who you are, where you come from, or what your background is, our schools open the doors of opportunity to all Montanans. When I first stood at this rostrum in 2013, I said that we not only need better jobs, but better schools too. At that time, just 2,500 students were taking dual enrollment classes. Today, more than 6,000 high school students are taking college classes while still in high school, saving Montana families $5 million in tuition each year. And this past fall, with the assistance of the university system, I launched the 1-2 free dual enrollment program, so that high school students can take their first 2 college classes without paying a single penny in tuition. Now, back in 2013, less than 3/4 of school districts in our state had access to high-speed internet. Today, 98% of districts are connected to high-speed internet at less than half of the cost. Teachers are using 21st century technology to prepare students in an increasingly technology-driven society. In 2013, breakfast after the bell was almost unheard of. And over 20% of the kids across Montana were considered food insecure. Since then, over 1/3 more income-eligible students are getting school breakfast. We've joined with the private sector in expanding breakfast after the bell to well over 100 new schools. I want to thank those partners, private sector partners, and my wife, Lisa, for all your efforts to end childhood hunger. In 2013, not a single one of our 2-year or tribal colleges was offering apprenticeships with on-the-job training to connect students to good-paying jobs. We now have apprenticeship coursework in 7 out of 10 2-year colleges and 5 of our 7 tribal colleges. And for our veterans, we've expanded opportunities to get college credit for prior learning that they gained through their military service to our nation. In 2013, states around the country were slashing university budgets and saddling students with steep tuition increases. Instead, we've increased investments in higher education while freezing college tuition 4 of the last 6 years, leading to Montana having the 4th lowest tuition and fees in the nation. We've worked together across the aisle, across rural and urban, and in partnership with communities, school districts, and the university system to make record investments in our educational system, offering students the tools that they need to succeed. Now let's build upon that progress we've made. And let's build upon it starting with our youngest learners. Last session, lawmakers from both sides of the aisle worked to provide $6 million to establish the STARS preschool pilot. Part of the premise behind that pilot was to learn whether this would work in our smaller communities. Until Webo had a STARS preschool option, even the closest child care provider was 30 miles away. The same is the case for Alberton. In Lewistown, I met a woman who told me she made too much money to qualify for Head Start, but couldn't afford to have her son in the kind of quality program that would give him a great start. If it weren't for the STARS preschool, she'd have to drop out of the workforce to take care of her children. In the first year of that pilot, 17 programs serving our largest communities, like the Head Start in Billings, to some of our smallest, like the Troy Public Schools. 93% of the participating preschoolers walked out ready for kindergarten. And we know not just from Montana's experience, but from the other 44 states prioritizing publicly funded preschool, that for every dollar invested, there's a $7 return in reduced criminal justice and social services costs, and in increased earnings. Quality preschool is an investment in our children, in our workforce, and for our business community. I'm pleased that Washington companies, First Interstate Bank, BNSF, Zoot Enterprises, and other major businesses are forming the Montana Coalition for School Readiness. And they'll be urging this 66th legislature to make a substantial state investment in quality pre-K. They and we know that preschool works. So I ask you to invest $30 million over the next 2 years, $22 million for public schools through the school funding formula, and $8 million for Head Starts and private and community providers through the STARS program. Let's provide kids and families in rural and urban areas access to high-quality, voluntary, affordable options. The future leaders of our state deserve no less. And let's not stop there. Let's once again freeze in-state college tuition and prevent what is effectively a tax increase on 28,000 Montana students and their families. And let's finally join 49 other states providing state-funded, need-based financial aid for students and adult learners. If the 66th legislature, if we're willing to provide $5 million for need-based aid, the university foundations have committed to matching that investment, better opening the doors of access to higher education to all Montanans. These investments, from preschool to higher education, they don't just make a difference today. They'll determine for decades to come the success of our students, our workers, and our families. Another opportunity that we have to impact the lives of Montanans is improving the health of Montanans, our businesses, and our economy. When I first stood at this rostrum, I asked that we transform the way that we deliver health care so we can create jobs and take care of those who need it most. At the time, our uninsured rate was at a staggering 20%. It's now the lowest it's ever been at under 8%. In 2013, we were investing just $75 million annually in community-based mental health, substance use treatment, and services for children, seniors, and people with disabilities. Today, we're making record investments in these services, over $135 million each year, plus serving an additional 14,000 adults, children, and people with disabilities. We've nearly doubled the number of substance use treatment providers while expanding access to 135 locations across our state. And Montanans now receive equal treatment under their health care plans for mental health as they do for physical health. You like that, huh? Your first clap. I like that. In 2013, there was no consistency in what the state was charged for medical care. At one facility, the state was charged $105,000 for a knee replacement of a state employee, 6 times more than it would cost on Medicare. Through reference-based pricing, we've now made medical costs more predictable, consistent, and comparable among facilities. As a result, taxpayers have saved over $13 million in state health plan costs in just the last 2 years. Now, I'll never forget a visit to Shoto for a community meeting during the 2015 session. I remember the hospital administrator telling me that 42% of the people that walked through their hospital doors didn't have insurance. And the chair of the county commission at the time, Joe Delwo, telling me that that hospital had saved his life, and that if they lost that hospital, they'd lose their community. In 2015, we came together and we passed one of the most innovative Medicaid expansion programs in the entire nation. We require those receiving health care to have skin in the game. We collect $5 million a year in premiums. And unlike every other nation, or every other program in the nation, we offer those receiving health care an opportunity to improve their lives and address their barriers to better employment by connecting with our Department of Labor. Just as our program is unique to the nation, so too are its results. No other state has increased labor force participation like we have because of our HelpLink program. The work that we've done in Montana, it's our work. It's a national model that other states are looking to adopt. Now, if I told you I had a business coming to Montana that'd create between 5,900 and 7,500 jobs in every corner of the state, and that would infuse over $350 million of new personal income into our state, my bet is you'd all tell me that sounds pretty darn good. Well, that's exactly what Medicaid expansion has done for the state of Montana. And it's also done so much more. That hospital in Shoto remains open today. In states that didn't expand Medicaid, rural hospitals have been closing at a rate 6 times greater than those that did. We haven't lost a one, and uncompensated care is down 50%. Through the expansion that we passed in 2015, we're providing more than just basic health care. Over 33,000 of our friends and neighbors have received mental health services. Almost 10,000 have been treated for substance abuse. It's that health care, physical and mental, that allows people to work. We know in 2017, 7 out of 10 Montanans on Medicaid expansion were employed while enrolled. Those who are not employed are growing in their careers through school or workforce training. They're either caregivers for a family member, or they're sick or disabled themselves. It doesn't make sense to me that when we have a nationally recognized model that's helping people succeed in today's economy, that we'd consider any measures that would take health coverage away from working folks, measures that would cost more to administer than provide the services in the first place, or measures that won't pass muster in the courts. And Medicaid expansion benefits businesses in every county, all 56, in every industry and of every size. Montana legislators, you reflect the businesses of our state. Some of you own restaurants, fast food chains, or grocery stores. Some of you own construction companies or hotels, and many of you own small businesses. Almost 9 out of 10 hotel and restaurant businesses here rely on Medicaid to provide health care for at least some of their employees. 2/3 of our Montana businesses in retail Over half of our construction firms, they rely on Medicaid. In total, nearly 18,000 Montana businesses had one or more of their employees enrolled in Medicaid in 2017. Now, I've listened to concerns from legislators on both sides of the aisle about the need to provide sufficient mental health funding. Without expansion, kiss those gains goodbye. I hear from you about the need to support rural communities. The rural hospitals that we are sustaining keep those communities viable. I've heard about the need to support our businesses. When almost 3 out of every 5 businesses in our state rely on Medicaid to provide health care for at least some of their employees, you aren't supporting our businesses, big and small, if you roll back the gains that we've made with Medicaid expansion. It is critical that we remove the sunset on Medicaid expansion, that we protect the health care for 95,000 of our family, our friends, and our neighbors, and that we protect our rural hospitals and that economy. Beyond Medicaid, Montanans hope and expect that being covered by health insurance will protect them from financial ruin if they're sick or injured. But sometimes, even having health insurance coverage, it's not enough. And we can do more. I'm asking you to lower premiums by as much as 20% for Montanans covered by individual health insurance by passing Senate Bill 125 to create a state reinsurance program. And let's see if the superintendent is clapping for preschool. And Montanans should also expect to know what they'll be paying for and how much the bill will be even before they receive medical care. House Bill 152 would protect us from surprise medical bills. They're all too frequent. I ask you to get it to my desk. Finally, it makes no sense to me that pharmacists cannot tell their patients when there's a different brand of medicine that would cost less than even their copay. That's why we're proposing a measure to put this practice by pharmacy benefit managers to an end. We have the opportunity not only to protect the progress that we've made, improving the health of Montanans and our economy, but to build on that progress. The long-term health of our communities also depends on whether or not they're able to sustain the strong economic growth our state's experienced in recent years. When I first stood at this rostrum in 2013, I asked you to take advantage of historically low interest rates, invest in infrastructure, and immediately create thousands of jobs across our state. We've now gone 6 years without passing a major infrastructure package. When you take into account increased inflationary costs and borrowing rates, $100 million worth of infrastructure delayed from 2013 would now cost us $154.5 million. And don't kid yourself, this is only going to increase over time. It's not to say that we haven't made progress. Over the past 6 years, we've invested $300 million into our communities and in our colleges to ensure that at the very least, we don't fall further behind. Those investments that we've made over these last 6 years, they've gone to upgrade water, sewer, schools, and bridges in all 56 counties. Every single county in our state has gotten a piece of that pie. Yet, when it comes to a major infrastructure package, each time we've fallen just a couple votes short. The failure isn't because of lack of interest or lack of need. It's because of the 2/3 vote required for bonding. This wasn't always the case. Republican governors, Stevens, Roscoe, and Martz, with mostly Republican-led legislators, they all passed bonding measures. And it's time that you do as well. Now, what I've proposed is a $290 million investment in infrastructure. In crafting this proposal, I've listened to your concerns. I heard you tell me that too much goes to buildings and not enough base infrastructure. I proposed more money for horizontal infrastructure, water, sewer, solid waste disposal, bridges, and broadband than I have for buildings. I've heard you tell me that not enough money goes to our rural areas of the state. I included a $44 million grant program for Montana's natural resource communities, largely in northern and eastern Montana, that are impacted by fossil fuel development. Look, I understand that some of you don't like the idea of upgrading our historical society or Romney Hall, the university system's #1 priority. Yet I believe that you also understand that both upgrades are desperately needed, and both are institutions that we, you and I, were responsible for taking care of. And because of legislative inaction, frankly, both are embarrassments. Even if, despite the demonstrated need, you don't like those buildings, recognize this. If we are ever going to break this logjam, we need to provide for both rural and urban, for our public institutions and for our smaller communities that cannot pay for their own water and sewer upgrades by themselves. We rank 47th in state debt per capita. Other states have chosen to incur reasonable borrowing rather than passing on crumbling infrastructure to their kids. We're out of step with the rest of the country. So I ask you to break that logjam. This session, let's deliver infrastructure for now and for the future generations that need it. Now, you and I both know that the distance between Helena, Montana and Washington, D.C. is measured by much more than the 2,150 geographical miles. We see each other's neighbors first. When making political decisions, we still typically share a common set of facts. By and large, we treat one another with respect, even when we disagree. Our politics are more than a sport or a zero-sum game. You don't have to hold a town hall meeting to hear what's on people's minds. I know, like me, you hear it wherever you go, the grocery store, at church, at high school sporting events. We are closer to the people here, and our campaign contribution limits are among the lowest in the nation. And they'll stay that way because the U.S. Supreme Court recently rejected a challenge to those limits. You should clap on that. Okay, good. Listen. It's one of the things that we shared that case. You know, when I stood at this rostrum in 2013, I asked the members of this body to help me to preserve the integrity of our elections and guarantee that our elections would never become auctions. Dark money and outside spending on our state elections was rampant in Montana at the time, thanks to the 2010 Citizens United decision. Whether you supported it at the time or not, I hope all members of this body could take pride in the fact that because of the Disclosure Act of 2015, many of those dark money groups have folded up their tent and they've left our state. And for those that remain, dark money groups can no longer hide behind their tax status. They have to report their spending during the last 90 days of our state elections. We should all celebrate that our elections are more transparent, closer to our citizens than perhaps any other state in the nation. And just as Montanans now expect to know who's attempting to influence our elections, Montanans should also know that the source of that money isn't coming from foreign countries. I'm asking this body to pass a law expressly outlawing foreign spending in our state elections. It really is. It's a glaring omission that we don't have a foreign money ban. Other states have already protected their elections. And we all know on both sides of the aisle that Montanans expect that the government will work for them, Montanans and Americans, not anybody else. Education, healthcare, infrastructure. In these and other areas, Montanans elected us to govern and to serve, to make decisions that do good rather than do harm. A little over a year ago, lawmakers were in the hallways of this Capitol for my first and only special session. You relayed to me in the months that followed that session that the cuts, which many of you in this chamber voted for, many made permanent, but those cuts resulted in real-life harmful consequences for Montanans all across our state. Just as I have every session, I'm eager to work with Democrats and Republicans to ensure that we pass a budget that's balanced and fiscally responsible. But let's make sure that the consequences of 2017 and the resulting special session will serve as lessons learned, not lessons repeated going forward. Now, I will insist on a $300 million reserve for unforeseen circumstances. Recognize the difference between reserving $300 million and $200 million. That's one bad fire season. That's a 1.3% error in revenue estimating over 2.5 years. It's the impact of things that we cannot control, like government shutdowns and trade wars, market volatility, and investor anxiety. A $300 million reserve, one that's accessible, not requiring that we decimate government services before those funds become available. It'll safeguard us collectively in this body from those factors beyond our control. And it'll safeguard us from repeating past mistakes of eliminating or gutting services that Montanans rely on. To make sure that we have that money in the bank, I am requesting changes that reflect Montana's changing economy by increasing the revenue the state receives from hotel guests, car rentals, investment licenses, tobacco products, and hard liquor. Let's craft a budget that's balanced, that funds the services Montanans expect and leaves money in the bank for unexpected things that might come our way. Don't send me a budget where the cuts aren't realized until after you adjourn. And don't send me a budget where I'll have to make the cuts due to the failure of this legislature to leave money in the bank. Because if you do, I'll send it back. I do believe that the budget that I've proposed is a reflection of the values that we hold as Montanans. It's a reflection of all the progress that we've made as a state these past 6 years. And it seeks to build on that progress with responsible investments in areas that Montanans expect. And it's a reflection of my optimism that we can create a brighter future for everyone fortunate enough to call themselves a Montanan. And I am an optimist. 6 years ago, I walked into this job hopeful and determined. And tonight, I'm no less optimistic than I was the first time I stood before you. In my very first day of the state, I implored this body to act like our kids are watching and learning from our words and our deeds, because they are. I'm optimistic that we can be role models that inspire that next generation. And if some leaders fall short, I'm optimistic that our friends and our neighbors, our fellow Montanans, will demand better of us all. I'm optimistic that we can demonstrate that while we may have our differences at times, Republicans and Democrats can still work together in Montana to get things done. And we can do it without ever shutting down a government. I'm optimistic that we can base our decisions not only on today's needs, but with an eye toward improving the Montana our kids and our grandkids, those future legislators and governors and justices, will inherit. I'm optimistic because Montana, this place, its people, its purpose, it built for me a world where the improbable was achievable. And that's a story that each of us understands, because that's our story. Every kid growing up in Montana deserves that same promise of opportunity. As we come together this session, the state of our state is strong. We as Montanans are strong. And by working together, by following the course that we set, we'll ensure that the Montana that our kids and our grandkids inherit is stronger than ever before. Thank you. God bless you. God bless Montana. And God bless the United States of America.
Thank you, Governor Bullock, for your State of the State address. Will the committee approach the well of the House to escort the governor from the House chambers?